Yeah, I had a very packed day today. Are we ready to begin? Do we have?
I'm just waiting for him to say we're going live.
I think we already are live, aren't we?
David, are we live yet?
Yeah, we're live.
Okay, call to order. This is the meeting of the State Board of Elections, April 22nd, 2021 at 2 p.m. Mr. Velp, Ms. Woodward, Mr. Fun, Mr. Miller, myself are all present, so there is a quorum present. Are there any additions to the agenda? Hearing none, we'll move to item 3. Item 3 is the election of a new chairman. I will exercise the prerogative of the chair, and I will nominate Mr. Volp to be State Board of Elections chairman. I do so with confidence based on his extensive background at both the local as well as the state level with regard to elections. Anyone that has served in the last year knows how challenging this has been. Anyone who has survived this last year and has made it out unscathed, as Mr. Volp has, I think will be a phenomenal chairman. So I formally nominate Bill Volp as chairman, State Board of Elections.
I would like to second that, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Any other nominations? Hearing none, nominations are closed. We'll take the vote. All in favor of Bill Volp as chairman of the State Board of Elections, say aye.
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 All opposed? No? No? Okay, Mr. Chairman, I turn the meeting over to you.
Well, that's very kind, and those are kind words. And we definitely have weathered the storm together. At least the three of us. Mr. Miller and Miss Woodward didn't go through the battle that we went through recently, but it was interesting. It was interesting. So thank you very much, and I humbly accept and hope that I can do. I mean, I had a great person to watch. Mike Cogan. Cogan did a fantastic job through a very difficult time, and I know we all believe that. And I had a year to watch what he did. So after seeing that, let's move on and see if we can get some business done. So approval of the minutes. I believe it's not only February 11th where we have open and closed meeting, but we also had a closed meeting on March 26th to approve. Is that correct? So has everybody had the chance to review those 3 minutes? Again, this is the February 11th open meeting, the February 11th closed meeting, and the March 26th closed meeting. Are there any additions, deletions, or corrections at this time to those minutes? Seeing none, is there a motion to accept them as they have been provided?
So moved.
So moved.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the minutes as presented signify by saying aye.
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 Great. Motion passed. Minutes are passed. So we have number 4 and number 5 on the agenda complete. We move on to the administrator's report, number 6.
Good afternoon, everyone. Nikki Charlson, State Board of Elections Deputy Administrator. You have, well, before I do that, are you hearing me okay?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. So you have the written administrator's report in front of you, or you were provided it. Mr. Chairman, we can follow what we've been doing the last several months, which is to just summarize and highlight things that we want to bring to your attention without reading it and perhaps covering everything. If it's not covered verbally, it doesn't make it really less important, but just in the efficiency of the meeting, we will just be highlighting and summarizing the content, but happy to follow up on any questions that you might have on any particular section. So I will start out with the first couple of sections, and then we'll just sort of rotate around the virtual room of the various SBE staff that are on the phone to present their sections, so you'll get to hear from others. Ms. Woodward, welcome to your first meeting. We tried to write this in such a way to provide you with some context and background, but if we have missed something or we use an acronym that you're not familiar with, please stop us and we will backtrack, provide you with a little bit of the background so you can put the information that we are presenting in context for you. So we will start with election director meetings. We have them every month, and you should have in your meeting materials a summary of our March meeting. And we had one last week in April, and we'll get that out to you as well. So with last week's conclusion of the General Assembly, you're going to hear and you receive some information about specific policy bills. Obviously, a big part of the General Assembly session is our budget. And so I just want to highlight that our budget passed intact. We have some additional reporting to do, but all of our requests were approved, which means that we have 2 new positions, one on the IT side and one on the policy side, as well as some new funding for voter outreach and for an online election judges tutorial, both of which either we did in the last election and are continuing it, or certainly online judges training became, saw the value of it certainly in the last year. So there's some more details in there. Just wanted to highlight very quickly the federal legislation. It's been in the news, House Resolution HR 1 and Senate 1, which are significant, very voluminous federal legislation looking at election reform. It's soup to nuts. It's a lot. The House version's passed the House and is sitting in the Senate. The Senate version is similar, but not identical to HR 1. And it looks like the Senate Rules Committee is going to be doing markup in May for that. These bills are just massive. I mean, the House bill is 800 pages. The election reform administration is 400. So it's huge amount to absorb. I'm happy to give you a very high level briefing some other time if you're interested, but it's massive. So we've been trying to work with committee staff, just highlighting some of the concerns that we have in Maryland or how it might change things. But that's just obviously stay tuned. There's a lot of work left to go before this gets enacted in any sense. The Mayo Conference, Mary has been our key liaison with the Maryland Association of Election Officials and planning their conference and whether our biennial meeting, which is a meeting we're required to hold every 2 years. It's an odd number of years, working to see whether we can fit in with their agenda in some way. So we will keep you posted as to whether it's going to be a combined event or separate, and then give you those dates. So if you are able to attend, you can. And with that, I will turn it over to Tracy Hartman, who is our Director of Special Projects here, to give her portion of the administrator's update.
Thank you, Nikki. Hello, everyone. Long time no see for some of you. And Ms. Woodward, welcome. And Mr. Miller, I haven't really talked to you before, so welcome. Election reform and management, I wanted to touch on the manual audit. The last meeting or last 2 meetings, I reported that the manual audits were in progress. They have been completed. They were completed at the end of February. And in 21 of the 24 local jurisdictions, there was 0 differences between the manual audit and the voting system. And the other 3, the errors were attributed to human error and 1 vote interpretation discrepancy. Those 3 discrepancies were well below the 0.5% threshold that would trigger more auditing. There is a report of the audit, of the manual audit, that is accessible on our website, and there is a link to that in the written version of the report. Also, the U.S. Election Assistance Commission data report, which is something that is done after each presidential or each general election. It is a massive compiling of all sorts of data from voting statistics. It's sort of everything compiled on the biggest spreadsheet you've ever seen. Anyway, that was completed on February 1st, and then the EAC comes back with questions or corrections, and so the final submission was submitted on March 6th, and I also had help with from Susan Tang on that report. So the next person to pass this on to, I guess, is Nikki. Or
Yeah,
Mary?
I'm not good. Yeah, Mary, go ahead. I can answer questions about the next section, but Mary.
Well, yes, thank you, and welcome, Mr. Miller and Ms. Woodward. Mary Kramer Wagner with voter registration. I'm sorry, I'm kind of losing my voice. So I believe Nikia is going to talk about the great progress that we've done with a new module with election management. Nikia, are you on?
I am. Is everyone able to hear me?
Yes,
Okay,
Nikia.
great. Thank you. My name is Nikia Wilbon Turner. I am the Director of Software Development at the State Board of Elections. The MD Voters version 7.5 will be released this weekend. It is now being integrated with the agency election management software. They will have a module under the voter registration, under the MD Voters voter registration database, and which will enable local boards as well as the state board to work together in regards to election night reporting, election night reporting, as well as ballot generation, ballot style reporting, and interaction within the voting system, with the voting system on election night. Mary, I'll pass it back to you.
Nikia, thank you so much.
Mary,
Oh, go
Mary, may
ahead.
I just interrupt for a minute? I believe Linda would like to say something here.
Yeah, I would like to thank Natasha Walker for literally on her own guiding this project from start to finish over 3 years that it took to get it done, and while also doing everything that she does with the ballots and the voting system. And it just was with the help of a couple contractors. She did a wonderful job of building this new system that will bring us into the modern age. The old system that she's replacing was built in the 1980s. It had to be constantly massaged and patched. And thanks to Natasha and her two contractors, they successfully used it through last year's election. But I'm just really excited and so proud of her for doing such a wonderful job. So I want to acknowledge her publicly for that. Thank you.
And thank you, Linda. So again, I apologize for the scratchy voice. So under federal and state law, the Motor Vehicle Administration, it has to offer voter registration transactions. And so MVA is the primary source of how we get the information, whether it be new or updated information. So I have provided you all with the data. It's very interesting just to see the numbers that we collect. So I have provided February and March's information for you all. Another program that Maryland is very proud to be part of is the Electronic Registration Information Center. We affectionately call it ERIC. It is a nonprofit organization that was formed in 2012. And again, Linda was the first to sign off. And the mission is to improve the accuracy of voter registration rolls. Currently, there are 30 states, including the District of Columbia as part of membership. So the members share voter registration data and motor vehicle administration data so that there is this match that is done, and we receive various reports. It also includes reports from the Social Security Administration regarding their death records. Maryland receives these reports every 2 months. Beginning next month, we are going to receive monthly Social Security death records and in-state duplicate records, which again, just continues to keep our voter registration rolls clean. I welcome the board members and anybody watching to go to visit www.ericstates.org to learn more about that process.
I have one question for you, Mary, if I could, real quick.
Yeah.
By the way, thank you for everything you do. I know that there was at one point, and I know with everything going on with, it's been some delays with everything going on, but you were talking, I believe, to MVA about the group that they're part of when somebody goes to another state and then their Maryland license get canceled, and how to get that data. Is that going anywhere yet?
Yes, I believe, and Nakia, I believe that is something that is on the radar screen. Nakia, I don't know if you are still on.
I am still here. And you're speaking about the surrendered license program.
That
is the data that we have begun to receive, and we're parsing through that data now.
Okay, great. So the surrendered license program, would that be the national MVA group that then, if you go to Ohio, move to Ohio and get a driver's license in Ohio, it cancels your Maryland license? Is that correct?
I'm not too sure about this. This is the data that we receive from the MVA. This is what is in their database. So if that program is available to the MVA has been passing that information along to us.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. If you could maybe next month update us on how that's going and we're massaging that data, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, Bill. I will include that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I will include that. Thank you. So, Janet Smith is our sole voter registration auditor, and she audits a lot of data. And audits include, but it expands every month, but new registrations, changes to voter records, making sure that the local boards are processing the reports timely, cancellation, party changes, you name it. And then any audits she finds, those are forwarded to the local boards for correction. And then she also follows up to make sure those corrections have been made. So that is that. Just to let you know, MD Voters, again, is our statewide voter registration database. In order to have access to the voter registration database, it does require a two-factor authentication, and that is a token. And so each individual that has access to that, they have a token. If they have not accessed that for a certain amount of time, they are no longer eligible to access that. And this is Nakia's point. And I don't know, Nakia, if I am being really bad at explaining that. Okay.
No, you're fine, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So then the other area that we have is non-citizens registering and voting. So I've been working with the Office of the State Prosecutor to come up with a method of forwarding on this information. We are still working through that process. I just wanted to let you know that between March 2020 through the 31st of 21, 224 individuals have been canceled due to being non-citizens. Of that 224, 5 have identified voting history, and those are the records that will be forwarded to the state prosecutor. And then just to put everything kind of in perspective, during that same, during that same time, we canceled 219,578 records. And that is due to moving out of state, death, voter requests, and other list maintenance issues. So when you look at the numbers, there we go. Excuse me. That's what we're looking at. So Bill, I hope that starts the dialogue that you were interested in having.
Perfect. That's exactly, it does put it in great perspective, Mary. My only thing that I would ask maybe as the months go that we find out what the disposition out, on the prosecution of the 5. And, I personally believe, and, other board members can chime in, of course, but that when you make an example of somebody who's committed a felony by prosecuting and successfully prosecuting that, it sets an example and a tone for the state that this is just something that's not allowed based on the law. So, but thank you very much for getting that data. That's perfect. Thank you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you.
Well, I guess that was up to me. Just wanted to welcome Ms. Woodward and Mr. Miller to the board. Congrats on your appointments here, and to our new chair as well. Congrats on that decision as well. So on the candidacy and campaign finance division here, candidacy, of course, the 2022 gubernatorial election has been opened for filings. That first date was 3rd of this year. And so far, we have approximately about 20 candidates that have filed to date. All those candidates that file, because it's still in person, still have to be by appointment only, and we have all that online for scheduling purposes. So any candidate can go there and schedule an appointment to come into the office.
Can't hear it.
Campaign finance. With campaign finance, the prohibition on fundraising during legislative session has ended. So now basically the 2022 gubernatorial elections fundraising efforts are in full force, and our office has just been handling some questions. The next disclosure report that's due is for persons doing business with state government entities and persons employing lobbyists. This is under Title 14 of the election law article. They're required to file a disclosure of contributions. The reports are due every 6 months, November 30th and May 31st, with a transaction period ending the last day of the month prior to the due date. So we are sending out notices to all the businesses right now, telling them that they have until May 31st to file. We had 5 enforcement actions over since the last report here. Basically, for our civil penalties that we've had, the Iron Workers PAC paid $250 for failure to record all contributions and expenditures. Friends of Dr. Kathleen White paid $600 for failure, again, to record all contributions and expenditures. Craig Cardozo Canassis for County Council, $450, again, for failure to record all contributions and expenditures. Citizens for Jeffrey Kenny paid $200 for failure to report all contributions because in addition, that individual was filing affidavits instead of campaign finance reports. And finally, Citizens for Patrick Gutierrez committee paid $500 for failure to record all contributions and expenditures on campaign finance reports. Just want to put out this as a reminder, because it's 8 days away, that all the board members need to complete and file a financial disclosure statement with the Ethics Commission. If you have any questions, feel free to give me a call and I'll connect you with Will Calhoun over at Ethics. They'll help you file those reports as well. So at the end of the entire campaign finance system is basically on a system called what we call MD-CRIS, which is the Maryland Campaign Reporting Information System. It is a browser-based program that has the modules for the business contributions also on the other side. We had 2 contracts, one that supports systems maintenance and development and business processes and data management and security. The other contract provides web hosting and security monitoring for MD-CRIS. So we have 2 of them. At the March 10th meeting, the Board of Public Works approved the option period for both contracts. The option period is for 2 years, which is in correlation with our election calendar. So we don't have to do a renewal during an election year. So it will go now from April 1st, 2021 through March 31st, 2023. And we have one more 2-year renewal left on the contract. And we're very happy with the vendor. The vendor is Notorian right now for both contracts. And with that, I'll pass it over to the voting systems.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. This is Shafiq Satterfield. First, welcome aboard, Ms. Woodward and Mr. Miller. Has definitely been a long time, but hello to all the board members. So as far as the voting systems update, just a couple quick nuggets to share with you that right now, SB, we are actively engaged in review of a voting system upgrade. There are significant benefits to back-end processes as well as the voting system associated with this update. Earlier this week, we started the certification window, which is allotted 60 days for the certification process. So at present time, we're actively involved in a lot of back-end testing, looking at different database configurations and things of that nature. And there will be planning is ongoing, but there will be a public demonstration, which is slated to take place in the month of May.
So I can do the transportation contract, Shafiq, if you don't want to do that.
Oh, sure. Go ahead.
Okay. So Jared talked about the March 10th Board of Public Works contract. We also got approved at that same meeting our transportation contract. So this is the contract that just enables us to move equipment from warehouses to voting locations and back again. It's one of those sort of unsung heroes kind of contracts that we have. And so the Board of Public Works approved that contract for us as well and gets us through the 2022 elections. So that's just FYI. And then Keith, are you on the line?
Yes, I am. Welcome to the new board members. My name is Keith Ross. I am the Assistant Deputy for Project Management and offer you a few items update on the inventory management. We are 70.26% complete with the inventory audit, which is an indication of the equipment of State Board of Elections physically being seen by or being touched by within a given period of time every year, which is a mandate by the state. The next area I'd like to discuss is the electronic poll book replacement project. As you can see there, the background information of the legacy system and what we have done pretty much thus far. We are now in the evaluation phase and in what I call the third of 4 major steps in the evaluation phase. And that is the receiving of equipment from the vendors so that there can be an on-site evaluation performed by SBE and contracting staff in support of that effort. So we're in the midst of that, and also obtaining some training before we actually do the evaluation by the different vendors so that we understand the nuances of the systems before we actually get into the actual testing. Just some new contract project team members that have joined, and the information is there, and that we continue to have communication with the local boards, realizing, it's very important to have that communication to make sure that everybody's abreast of what is going on. Then just a few other things, the SBE warehouse, in transitioning from the general election where we stored a lot of equipment, and we have now sent a lot of equipment back to the local boards who needed to have the storage, temporary storage at the SBE Central Warehouse. And we're preparing for these major projects that are coming up, including the poll book project and the use of the environment there. And also there's still some other local boards that need to have storage of items because they just ran out of space. So we continually work with the local boards in order to make that happen. That's all I have, and turn it over to the Information Systems and Technology and Security Group.
Hello, everyone. This is Fred Breckbill. I'm the Chief Information Officer here at SBE. I assume you can hear me. Okay. I guess in the spirit of no good deed goes unpunished, we've decided to give two of our very star performers, Nakia and Shafiq, some expanded responsibilities in the IT and services and technology division. Goal being to help make it a more cohesive unit in support of election activities. So Nakia has been retitled as the Director of Software Development. She was formerly Director of VR Systems, or voter registration. So what we've done is we've given her all of the software development. All of the software development is under her, including poll book. And we hope that this will help to make communication between the applications even better than it was before. And also, Shafiq, we've actually set up a new division within Information Systems and Technology. Its sole goal is to do IT project management and to make sure that all the different IT projects that we're working on, which is a significant number this year, just like last year, all of that, those projects are managed and aligned with each other, and the data from those projects gets rolled up into kind of a master schedule, master alignment project plan, so that we have a better idea of what's going on in the IT department at SBE. And with that, if there's no questions, I will pass it on to the legislation.
Who's handling that?
Hi, this is Donna Duncan. Hello, everyone. I am not even going to begin to summarize the legislation. I've included the 90-day summary that is provided by the Department of Legislative Services. And if you have specific questions, we are still analyzing each of these bills and determining the tasks that will roll out of each of these bills. Jared and Mary were instrumental in being the faces, so to speak, in dealing with the General Assembly this year. We thank them very much. And of course, Linda, Nikki, and I are in the background dealing with them as well. But if you have specific questions about bills, I'm sure one of us could at least touch on them, but Nikki or Linda or Jared may want to speak to any of the particular ones. I will leave it at that.
Are there any, is there anything that any of the staff sees that stand out that are going to require a tremendous amount of change or work?
So I guess, go ahead, Mary.
No, I was just going to say, I know one of the bills is increasing the time from 7 a.m. Jared, do you have anything?
Well, on legislation, I just wanted to say we had both of our departmental bills were approved, so that was good. And some of our other departmental legislation was approved through other bills. We'll have to come back. A couple of our departmental legislation did not make it across the finish line. So we'll start that process later on this year, most notably like statute of limitations and our Title 14 bill. But as to answer the chair's question here, yes, I think that we've had, there was a couple of bills that changed the hours of operations for early voting. They increased them to make it more uniformed across the board. So all the hours are now the same as on election day. And there have been an increase there was a change in the formula for early voting centers as well, increasing the number and how local boards of elections have to select the locations. There's criteria now that is set in law for that as well. So those are some significant pieces. Also, I guess for my purposes here, a significant piece, which, on the campaign finance front was public financing. They changed the formula for public financing for gubernatorial elections to match more what the counties are doing, and also put in a provision so that it has adequate sources of funding for the first time in its nearly 50-year history. So that was a significant, I would say, piece of legislation, and and a long time coming. So now the public financing program is going to be a viable option for future candidates, knowing that there is going to be a steady source of money in the fund from this point forward.
And if I may add to, go ahead.
Just a quick comment. I want to commend Jared and all the SB staff that worked on or responded. I'll use the word responded to more election bills than I've ever seen. Despite a very successful election season, there was a great interest in election bills. And because my day job had me in many hearings, I would constantly see Jared being grilled, questioned on bills. But you all did an amazing job in a very difficult session.
Thank you.
If I might also add that many of these bills are going to require regulations to be adopted. And so probably over the next couple of months, you'll be seeing us present regulations related to the implementation of these new bills. So we will, tell you that, that they're coming out of legislation that's passed, and that's really the opportunity to discuss them and our regulations generally just follow what the bill says. And many of them codified practices that we were already doing, which is great. And then it formalizes it, but expect to see regulations or proposed regulations coming to you over the next couple of months as we start to lay the foundation for implementing these changes.
Thank
Bill,
you. Yes, sure.
Yeah, I have a question. Of any of these bills, is there expected to be litigation over any of them to prevent enactment from anything going into effect? Any challenges that were percolating at the committee hearings or anything else? Groups that are intending to challenge?
No, not that I am aware of with our processes. So I didn't hear of any possible litigation on these laws.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Thank you. Any other questions from the board? Yes, Malcolm.
The increase in early voting centers, is that cost split between the state and the local boards, or is it totally on the local boards?
It would depend if more voting equipment, for example, is needed to provide those, that would be a shared cost. But say any facility rentals or the hiring of more election judges, supplies, those kinds of things would be local board costs.
Was this taken into consideration in looking at the budget for the coming year?
Well, the timing of it is such that oftentimes the counties are doing their budgets at the same time that the legislature is in session. So there is some overlap. But Mayo, the Maryland Association of Election Officials.
You're frozen, Nikki.
Yeah. Ms. Charleston, I think you are frozen. Let's see if you come back to us. While we're waiting to see if her face begins to move again. Mr. Fund, that's an excellent question and something that I can tell you when I was on the LD side of things that changed the game often, as things came out of legislation that were passed on to the counties and the counties didn't have it in their budgets and ended up in supplemental budgets.
I can't hear it either.
Yeah, it doesn't look like we're going to get, I think you may have to reboot.
Yeah, we're having some issues here because of the power outage. She's lost her connection. Can I turn it over to you, Art, to give your briefing, please?
Yes, absolutely. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, I'm getting an echo. It's not loud enough.
There's a lot of
Echo.
repeating. Echo.
Yeah.
Oh, it would probably help if a couple of you could mute then.
Can you all hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Okay. Okay. I'm going to try the camera one more time. If it starts echoing, then we'll stop. Okay, success.
Success.
Thank you. It's been a great talk. I'll see you all later. Okay. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Thank you and congratulations. Welcome, Ms. Woodward and Mr. Miller. Welcome on board. SBE has been working very diligently with its vendors and public partners to advance our cybersecurity governance, infrastructure, and operations programs. If you've been watching the headlines, you probably have seen today's adversaries are better funded and more organized than ever online. They're using increasingly more sophisticated methods and attacks with a mission to disrupt U.S. governments, private industry, And definitely, if the last election cycle is an example, they definitely are interested in disrupting our election programs. So we have been working to consistently enhance our efforts and responding to these threats through the implementation of our 5-part cybersecurity plan. The cornerstone of that plan is a risk-based information security program. This program includes standards for governance, architecture, threat and vulnerability management, incident detection and response. The program itself is based upon NIST, the National Institute of Standards and Technologies, their cybersecurity frameworks. That framework is mandated for federal agencies and is in use in the majority of US organizations. It's strongly recommended for critical infrastructure, which includes elections. And there are some specific controls that are laid out to assist local boards of elections, state boards of elections in how to secure their infrastructure. So we're using that as much of our foundation for our governance and our standards and policies. This program is compatible with Maryland State IT policies and also with the majority of other cybersecurity frameworks. So as a part of this program, we conduct in-depth ongoing assessments, audits, and testing to identify the risks and opportunities so that we can constantly improve our cybersecurity posture. So that's the cornerstone. That's part one of that cybersecurity plan. There are several other elements, the second of which is secure cyber architecture or our cyber defense. A number of these things, I can't talk specifics in open session, so please, if you have questions, I'll be happy to answer them when we go into closed session, but I will give you an overview here. In terms of our secure architecture, we implement what's called a zero trust approach. In other words, we trust not only the perimeter, but we also work to contain and eradicate bad actors, even if they get in. We have a fully redundant architecture. So if critical systems fail, our IT teams have done some amazing things in working with our data centers to fail over completely to a separate data center within a matter of hours if core systems fail. So another aspect, the third part of our cybersecurity plan has to do with threat and vulnerability detection and management. This is where we work internally and in cooperation with our vendors and federal partners to find, track, and mitigate any potential vulnerabilities in our infrastructure before the bad actors do. So we do a considerable amount of vulnerability scanning and testing. We conduct ongoing external and internal scans. We've also partnered with DHS to conduct regular cyber hygiene scans of our environments. We also get active vulnerability and threat intelligence from our government partners and from various vendors. Another aspect to our plan is the detection and analysis of potential attacks. We have a security operations center that has been implemented along with our data center. That security operations center is a 24/7 operation monitoring all of our applications, our web servers, our devices in real time to detect and alert on any malicious activity and to aid in incident response. In addition to that, the Center for Internet Security, the CIS, provides us threat detection and alerts through the use of something called an Albert sensor that they put into our data center. We are also plugged into our partners at DHS, FBI, and the Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center for detection and alerting on wider spread attacks that may be going on nationally or globally. Nikia was talking a little while ago. Her team has done an amazing job with secure development for doing analysis and logging of suspicious behavior in applications. Again, I won't go too much into the detail but we do a lot of watching for potential or suspicious activity and attacks, and even have some automation built in to block these attacks before they even get started. So one other aspect is our social media monitoring and defense services. This was very helpful during the 2020 general election, and we've chosen now to make it a permanent part of our monitoring efforts. This does monitoring of all types of fraud, including misinformation about the elections, people who may attempt to impersonate election officials, and other types of fraud that may deter or prevent voters from voting. So this has been a very useful service, and we'll continue to use this going forward. The final aspect to our cybersecurity plan, our program, is the rapid response and remediation of attempts to attack our systems. The SBE team has procedures and playbooks for a wide range of scenarios that we've worked out with internally and with our data center partners. The Security Operations Center and Data Center have integrated incident response services, as well as the failover capabilities I mentioned. And we work very closely with public partners, DHS, the Cybersecurity Infrastructure and Security Agency, local boards of elections, Maryland Coordination and Analysis Center, FBI, et cetera. And they are very helpful. They were very helpful during the elections to be available in case there were incidents that happened. We also participate in regular tabletop exercises to rehearse and test our responses to various types of attacks. So everything from tabletop to vote to internal exercises we do, exercises with Microsoft and DHS. So I guess that's about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
I would prefer that if any of the board members have specific questions, that we do that in the closed session so as to maintain security. Because the answer, I would imagine that that was as much information as you can give publicly.
Hey, that's it. And I appreciate that very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
No problem. So if anybody has any questions, we can move them to the closed session, which we will have today. So is there anything else to the administrator's report?
This is Nikki. No, there isn't. And I'm sorry about my internet connection here. I wanted to provide the context for Art's briefing. So the board several years ago adopted a resolution or a motion to ask to receive quarterly information security updates. And so that is the context under which Art was presenting that update. This is one of those quarters. It was 3 times a year. April was one of them. And so we are always happy to answer your questions about it, of course. But the formal request for a briefing is every quarter. And this is the April briefing. But again, we can answer any specific questions in closed.
Thank you very much. Appreciate that. So do any board members have any questions outside of the ones for the security briefing for the administrator's report? Seeing none, we'll move on to the Assistant Attorney General's report.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome again, Ms. Woodward and Mr. Miller. What the Assistant Attorney General's report is just a rundown, a summary of developments and litigation the Board of Elections is involved in. During election years, the list tends to be longer than it is right now. So with that, I'll just dive in and provide a summary. I'll also give a little bit of background on each of these cases, just 1 minute more, maybe 1 or 2 minutes more per case, just so that you have a kind of a basic understanding of what we're involved in. And then going forward, each update will really only focus on the changes from the last one. So the first matter on your list is Fusaro versus Davitt. This is a challenge by a resident of the state of Virginia to the laws in Maryland governing access to Maryland's list of registered voters. He challenged both the restriction on access, the fact that under state law, access is provided only to Maryland registered voters to a voter list, and he challenged the requirement that the list may only be used for purposes related to the electoral process. The district court did not reach the issue, the challenge to the restriction on voter access or on access to non-residents, because in a case that was being litigated at the same time by an organization called Judicial Watch, Judicial Watch successfully got the court to find that aspect of the law was preempted by the National Voter Registration Act, which required records related to list maintenance, essentially, to be available for public inspection. And the court refused to reconcile or concluded that it was in conflict with Maryland's restriction on access to Maryland registered voters. The court concluded that the objectives of Congress were to make any member of the public available or entitled to inspect those records. So the court declined to reach that issue and instead reached the electoral process issue, upheld that aspect of the law, and the case is now on appeal. Argument had originally been scheduled for May, but then due to a conflict was removed from the calendar and has not been rescheduled. So we'll update you when and if that does get scheduled. The next matter is what I would characterize as a dormant matter. This case was filed years ago by plaintiffs challenging practices that were in existence then, that essentially they alleged that the Board of Elections in the state violated the rights of people in detention who were still eligible to vote under state law by failing to facilitate that process. The case was removed to federal court, and the federal claims were dismissed, and then the case remanded to state court, where it has languished on the docket since then. I note that there was legislation passed this year which formalized a process by which persons who are in detention but still eligible to vote are now required by the Department of Corrections and the State Board of Elections to essentially be given information and access to voter registration materials, et cetera. So I think there's probably a question of mootness now to the remaining claims in this case. In any event, that case is still on the docket. The next matter is the National Federation of the Blind versus Lamone. This case was filed in 2019 by the organization, the NFB Maryland chapter, and several individual plaintiffs challenging the processes in place by which the ballot marking devices, which are accessible to voters, particularly voters with visual impairments, by which those devices are deployed, and the number of voters that are required to use those devices. The allegation was that so few of these devices are deployed that when, for whatever reason, they may not be working in a particular polling place, a person who requires its use is essentially deprived of the right to vote independently because they'll need somebody to help them fill out a paper ballot. Also, the claim is that if so few voters use these, because the BMDs produce ballots that are different size than the paper ballots that are filled out by hand, then there's a risk that a voter's identity will be able to be identified just by the shape of the ballot. If everybody knows that only one or two people in a particular precinct use the BMD, then it won't take much sleuthing to figure out, if one wanted to, how those individuals voted. So that case has proceeded over the last several years. The plaintiffs sought a preliminary injunction in the fall of 2019 that would have governed the 2020 elections. That hearing was took place in January of 2020 before the pandemic hit. Their PI motion was denied, but at the same hearing, our motion to dismiss was denied, and we've been in discovery ever since. In November, either November or early December, the parties agreed to stay discovery or seek a stay of discovery to pursue settlement, and we've been engaged for several months during that process now. The stay's been extended several times. Since then, the current stay is set to expire next week, and discussions are ongoing. Finally, the last matter is probably the most procedurally complicated one, only because the plaintiff, who is a pro se plaintiff, has filed several lawsuits, and they're all at different stages of the litigation process. The short version of the presentation about Mr. Yee's case is this is Chong Soo Yee versus Hogan. There are 6 lawsuits that he's filed to date. All of them substantially are making the same claims. The claims are that it is illegal for the state to allow the use of religious facilities for polling places. It is illegal for the state to use optical scanners to read ballots. It is illegal for the state to identify the candidates' party affiliations on ballots. And there was one more claim in there that I'm not able to remember off the top of my head. In any event, his initial round of complaints, he filed 2 complaints initially. Those were dismissed. Mr. Yee appealed those dismissals. And while those appeals were pending, he filed a new round of complaints, 4 different complaints. We have since been able to dismiss those 4 complaints. Those appeals, he has appealed from those. Those are now pending. His appeals in those matters were dismissed for failing to pay a filing fee. And he has appealed that dismissal or he sought certiorari from the Court of Appeals on those dismissals. And so that petition for certiorari is pending. Meanwhile, his first appeal was rehabilitated. He had sought leave to not pay a filing fee, and his appeal was dismissed for failing to file a civil information report. He successfully moved for reconsideration of that dismissal. So back in November, the court reinstated his appeal, set a briefing schedule. Some more orders were issued. He attempted to file a brief that was bounced for failing to comply with the rules governing briefs, but he was able to get the court to impose an informal brief requirement rather than the formal brief requirement in the Court of Special Appeals. It's really just a form brief now that he can fill out. It's intended to allow parties like Mr. Yee, who are proceeding pro se, to be able to litigate something in the Court of Special Appeals without having to follow all the strict rules governing how you file things. He filed his brief last week. He failed to include a certificate of service on it, however, and the court this morning informed him by letter that it was rejecting his brief and that he needed to cure that defect, essentially just file a paragraph saying that he served the brief on the Attorney General's office within 30 days. So we await that. We will respond in due course and then deal with whatever the Court of Appeals does with his cases that are before it right now. So those are the matters that are currently pending. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Did we file a brief in his appeal?
We have not yet filed a brief in his appeal. We're waiting for the court to accept his informal brief and then we'll respond.
Any other questions from the board? I mean, I believe that we have some discussion if you have questions pertaining to some matters that would be during closed session. So those would not be appropriate in open session.
That's right.
So seeing no questions, let's move on to old business. Is there any old business? I know of no old business, so we will move to new business. Is there any new business? The only thing I'd like to bring up here is another formal hello to Sky Woodward, Ms. Woodward, I think this is your first meeting, and Mr. Severin Miller, I think this is probably your third meeting, right? But we all look forward to working with you all, and we all hopefully can join together and hope that we don't have another pandemic so that life is easier. Is there any new business?
Fingers crossed. Thanks, Bill.
Yes. So seeing no other new business, I believe we have one speaker today. Is that correct? Is the speaker on the line?
I'm on the line. Hello.
Hi, so let me just start by saying welcome.
Thank you.
We're going to have, you have 5 minutes.
Okay.
And then if any board members have questions, of course, that's not included in your 5 minutes, but the chair has a 5-minute pack on, so whatever you can fit in 5 minutes, we will be very attentive to.
Okay, very good. My name is Linda Dorsey Walker. I'm a resident of Baltimore County. I come before you today as a private citizen who has attended all of the State Board of Elections meetings for the past year or so, and who routinely follows up on those meetings with information to members of the community. I want to thank you for this opportunity to speak with you briefly about the need for the State Board of Elections to establish sanctions against any local Board of Elections director under certain circumstances. I also want to recommend 2 proactive, protective measures be put in place that may actually negate the need for sanctions. It's not my intent to try to criticize any one local Board of Elections director, but rather to convince you that unless election consistency exists from jurisdiction to jurisdiction, there can't be true election integrity or trust by the public. During the last election cycle, the State Board of Elections informed all local Board of Elections directors that each county would be allowed the opportunity to expand the number of early voting sites by 1 location. However, to do so meant that the director of the local Board of Elections must seek and acquire the signature of the county board, county executive or county administrator within a certain time frame. In the vast majority of instances, this was done immediately by the local Board of Election director. And in the vast majority of instances, all but 2, I think, an additional early voting site was sought and granted right away. In the case of 1 very large jurisdiction, however, it was learned weeks after that option had been extended by the State Board of Elections that the option to expand the number of early voting sites, that information was never shared or discussed with the county executive or county administrator prior to me bringing it to their attention. By that time, the local Board of Elections plan had already been submitted to the State Board of Elections. Even after that, when the State Board of Elections allowed local boards to amend their plans, and some did readily, there was a continued resistance to doing so. Members of the community were shocked and disturbed to hear that this information was not shared on day 1, and that only after an observant member, myself, had brought it to the attention of the county leadership did they learn that the option exists. My question is this, my recommendation: could the State Board of Elections not require proof that local board directors report that they have shared the information within a 48-hour period? If the option is to expand the services, then that's the county executive or county administrator should sign off that this information was brought to their attention on a timely basis and they choose to do so and whatever else is entailed. If their choice is to not accept the offer, then there should be a second sign-off line. I used to write stuff for former Governor Schaefer, and there were 2 lines that you had to sign. I accept it or I reject it. And by signing off on it, those in leadership, in this case, the State Board of Elections, would have a way of knowing that each and every director had actually shared the information and that the county executive was made aware on a timely basis because they'd have to date it, and they chose to act or not to act. Not to do so forces the state board to assume that every local board of directors, local board director acted responsibly and shared the information as requested on a timely basis. Similarly, every jurisdiction was informed by that there was the opportunity to place a purchase order to acquire many more voter drop-off boxes than were available during the primary election. In that particular case, they had to file a purchase order, but it had to be done on a timely basis. It was clearly stated that the cost of these boxes would be covered under the CARES Act, and that should not be a limitation or limit jurisdictions for getting all of the boxes that were needed. Once again, nearly every jurisdiction went about immediately trying to increase their allocation of boxes, but not every jurisdiction did. In at least one case, the purchase order to acquire additional drop-off boxes was not submitted until after that full information was shared by me with the county administration, which had been given the impression months in advance of the general election that it was too late to ask for additional drop-off boxes. So we were about to have the identical number that we had during the primary election. This was not true. It was not too late. A second order was yet to be placed. Upon inquiring further, I learned that there had been a concern expressed by the local board to the administration after it was brought to their attention that it was too late to file the purchase order, that it meant additional work for their staff that was already overworked, so why bother asking for them? Drop-off boxes required additional security, and that was—
We're about a minute over, so if you could wrap up your—
Okay. So the county administration had not previously been given the option to come up with their own plan to fund these additional election measures or election enhancements. This was a matter of happenstance that they happened to learn this. Again, had they been required to have a sign-off that election enhancements were being put in place by the State Board of Elections, and you needed to send all that material, that information directly, not just to local board of directors, who may say, my staff is already overworked, I'm not going to ask for those enhancements. Send it to the county administrators so that they have the option to say, we'll spend the money. In this particular case, the county was more than willing to spend the money and did, but some of the drop-off boxes were being put in place a week in advance of the general election, while other jurisdictions had theirs in place 30 days in advance of the general election. That erodes.
Yeah, I think that we might have lost Ms. Dorsey Walker there. Does any board member have a question about the testimony that's been given?
I'm still here.
Oh, you're still there.
Mm-hmm.
Does any board member have any questions for Miss Dorsey Walker?
Do you feel that these are valid suggestions?
Any board member have any comments?
Thank you very much for sharing this with us. It's important for us to get input other than just what comes out of our own mouths. And I think this is worth looking into. My initial reaction is that we have some jurisdiction over the local boards, but we can't, for example, force a county executive to either sign or not sign a document.
Sure.
So I'm not sure that the entire suggestion is workable, but I think it's worth looking into, and I think we should.
Right. I'm not suggesting that any county executive should feel they must sign it. That's why I said, if you have two sign-off lines saying, I accept it and whatever cost is involved, or I reject it, then at least you know that they were made aware. And in these two instances, they didn't know anything about it till I brought it to their attention. And in the second case, it made things very behind in terms of processing a purchase order in I think it was the third round.
Yeah. Are there any other comments or questions from any other board members? So it's something we will take under advisement. We really appreciate your time and your attention, Ms. Dorsey Walker, for today to bring these issues up. And we thank you for your time. And we will move on now to, I think that's the only speaker we had scheduled for today. We move on to disclosure of campaign contributions. And for Mr. Miller, I think you've seen that a few times. Ms. Woodward, I'm not sure you have. If you make any contributions to anything from federal to state, this is the time when you disclose those contributions and they're recorded. So does any member of the board have any contributions to list at this time?
Nope.
Okay, no contributions at this point. We are to the point where we schedule our next meeting. So our next meeting would normally be, anybody have that in front of them? Would be May 27th, May 27th. Does that date work for everyone involved? That's 27 May at 2 p.m. And maybe we won't even have a power outage that day. That works for everybody. So the next meeting will be scheduled 27th of May at 2 p.m. Is there, and seeing no other business then, including in our agenda, we're coming up to the time of the closed meeting. Before I read and look for a motion and a second, let me say that we have concluded all other items of our agenda today. So as we enter closed session from the open session, we will not be returning to the open session with any other business today. So this will be the close of our open session as we move into closed section. And now the board will consider whether to meet in closed session to consult with counsel to obtain legal advice as permitted by section 3-305 B7 and 8 of the general provisions article. Meeting in closed session will allow the members of the board to seek and obtain legal advice with board counsel without waiver of the attorney-client privilege and obtain information from staff about pending or potential litigation. We will discuss public security as permitted by section 3-305 subsection B10, since a public discussion would constitute a risk to the public or to public security. Meeting in closed session allows the members to discuss securing the election process without introducing additional risk to that process. We'll also discuss network architecture and security of election network as permitted by section 3-305 subsection B and 15 of the general provisions article. Meeting in closed session allows the members to discuss the security of information systems without introducing additional risk to that process. May I have a motion to meet in closed session?
So moved.
Yeah.
So moved.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 So our meeting is now closed. Again, we will, on the motion having passed, the board will meet in closed session in accordance with exemptions B, 7, 8, 10, and 15 of section 3-305 of the Open Meetings Act. So we will not be returning to open session. So for those I see in closed session, I'll see you in a minute. And for everyone else, we'll see you soon. Thank you.